Well, my name is SATYA TRIPATHI. I am the Secretary General of the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. I also have two other hats, several actually, but the two others that are significant are that I am a Senior Distinguished Fellow with the World Agroforestry Center, and I'm also the Chancellor of the Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences, which is the world's largest academic institution for indigenous people and cultures. In that institution, we teach about 60,000 children, all for free, accommodation, food, education, everything from kindergarten to postdoc. So, and I'm very proud of that role as well.
Yeah. What led you to do the work that you do? What motivated you?
Well, I have always been motivated by the power of philanthropy, but not just the giving away part, which is very useful and very important. It allows people with purpose to actually take those resources and do something with it. But what is extremely important is that doing purpose philanthropy, which is what I do. As the Secretary General of the Global Alliance, I work for free, and so is the World Agroforestry Center assignment, as is the assignment with the Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences. So all these three roles that I fulfill, I actually work for free. It gives you tremendous satisfaction that you're able to do something meaningful with your time without being constrained by the economic returns it generates.
Okay. And from a climate point of view and just seeing the state of things, just talk about how that motivated you.
Well, I think, I have been a development economist for a long time, where the focus of our work is sustainable development and bringing the people at the bottom of the pyramid right up to the top where they belong, if their potential is to be allowed to be fulfilled. And in that process, about 15 years ago, I realized that if you do not work on climate change and the adverse impacts of climate change, then all the good work that has been done by millions of development practitioners around the world, it will all come to nothing, because climate change will upend everything. We wrongly call it climate change. We should actually call it climate catastrophe or climate breakdown, because that's what it really is. That's the point where the humanity is at right now.
Where do you think we are right now, and what keeps you awake at night?
Well, where we are right now is that we are an incredibly stupid species, and I'm talking about humans, not the other ones. They're actually quite intelligent. There are about 8 million of them, and we are in the process of completely destroying the species architecture that exists on the planet. And of course, the planet will go on without us. The planet really doesn't need us, because it has dealt with species far mightier than us, far greater than us, far consequential than us. Think of the dinosaurs. They don't exist anymore. So the planet will be fine, but for us as the human of the species to be fine, we really need to change our behavior in an exponential way.
The film that we're making is primarily about climate restoration, but it doesn't really work without ecosystem restoration. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we are at Central Park, which is one of the best urban forests in the world, because it has been allowed to live and breathe in its natural habitat, despite the fact that you have skyscrapers all around it. And that, I think, explains why it is so significant to keep our ecosystems, and where we've lost them, to restore them back to their natural glory. And the moment we do that, the birds and the bees and the biodiversity, everything comes back. And with that, all their beneficial impact on our food systems and how we live and breathe and work in our own habitats. So while it is very important that the humans are healthy and very productive, it is even more important that all the 8 million other species are healthy and impactful to nurturing the web of life as we know it.
Great. Yeah, can you just give us an overview of GASP?
Well, the Global Alliance for Sustainable Planet is a catalyst. We are a free service for humanity, and what we do is rather simple. We incubate ideas with system scale potential. We find the champions that can take those ideas to scale. We find the resources in the billions, not in the millions, because we are at a point of time in our history where we need trillions to make a difference to what is happening in terms of the climate breakdown. So that's what we do. We bring ideas, we bring people, we bring resources, all of that together in support of Mother Nature, so that Mother Nature can serve humanity and all the 8 million species effectively as it has for billions of years.
Can you talk about, in particular, the sustainable and regenerative agriculture and what the benefits are of that?
Well, sustainable agriculture or regenerative agriculture draws effectively from how natural ecosystems exist in a circular loop. If you have ever been to a good forest, a natural forest, you would know that nobody has put a pinch of fertilizer or pesticides in a forest to keep it healthy. Forest keeps itself healthy, or forests keep themselves healthy because that's how nature has orchestrated it to be. There's a circular flow of energy from photosynthesis down to the soil, microbes through the root system, and the predator-prey relationship between the trees and the soil, and the creatures that live within the soil substrata, and all of it together makes the ecosystem very healthy. When we interrupt it, like we have done with man-made agriculture, it really destroys the ecosystem. It kills the beneficial species, the microbes. It destroys the soil porosity, soil nutrition, soil moisture, leading to soil compaction and soil erosion. And then that's what regenerative agriculture does. It just does the opposite. It brings back soil health. It improves soil moisture and soil porosity. It brings back the microbes, allows them to help agriculture. And you do that by preventing the use of synthetic chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and also by using natural substances only for agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is not organic farming, in which case you're using a lot of compost. You're basically still a fertilizer-based farming. It's just that you're not using synthetic chemical fertilizers anymore. You're using natural fertilizers or biomass fertilizers, which is what compost is.
And then I know you answered this, but can you just tie that in again in terms of the consequence of that as far as carbon sequestration?
Well, in terms of carbon sequestration, let me put it this way. Carbon is what carbon does. So in terms of the scientific measure of carbon, whether it's direct air capture, whether it is carbon capture or storage, or whether it is more efficient means of production or more energy efficient ways of using electricity like LED bulbs and, at a very basic level, they all help either draw back or prevent emissions. But what agriculture does is that while it gives you the same measure of soil, organic carbon gives you the same measure of, I'll repeat that.
I'm sorry, let's just stop and start the file again. Okay.
So what regenerative agriculture does in comparison to other ways of removing carbon from the atmosphere is that while it gives you the same measure of CO2 in terms of a ton of carbon, it also, there's a pathway, and that pathway is completely beneficial in so very many ways. Let me explain why I think so. So the first thing is that by doing that, what you're doing is you're improving soil health. You're improving the way you're growing your food, and as we have seen with regenerative agriculture in different parts of the world, it does not reduce your yields. It reduces input costs by as much as 80%. So poor people, which is most of the smallholders, can then actually benefit from this without having to use chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So my theory is that carbon is what carbon does, and in terms of what it does with regenerative agriculture, whether it is reducing carbon by pumping out less water, which happens in most parts of the world with smallholder agriculture, or by not using synthetic chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Those are all reduction credits. But in terms of the sequestration credits, what it does is it basically brings back soil health by low till or no till, and by using natural substances, and also effectively harvesting sunlight. There's something called 5-layer farming or 7-layer farming, where you are actually harvesting the sunlight very effectively by tree-based crops to creepers and then cash crops, all intermixed. And the guiding principle there is that the soil remains covered 365 days a year. And that's what then allows soil carbon to be sequestered.
You spoke before about the value, I guess, moving on to the carbon credit side of things. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, talking about carbon credits and the value of it to the fight against climate change, we all understand that CO2 needs to be drawn back from the atmosphere. Now, the atmosphere has 422 parts per million carbon concentration at this time, as measured by scientists, which is very little actually in terms of. I'll start again.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Just standing next and start speaking. So, in terms of carbon credits, what is significant to note that while the measure of carbon remains the same, when it comes from regenerative agriculture, it works very differently. Why so? Because when you do that, you're actually creating a beneficial ecosystem. You're bringing back the ecosystems. You are providing prosperity for people at the bottom of the pyramid, because the input cost of agriculture is less and the output is either the same or much more, depending on the crop and the agroclimatic zone. Birds and bees are nesting in agricultural fields, so the biodiversity is coming back, and public health is improving exponentially, because for the first time in their lives, poor people can actually afford to get clean food for their families. That's simple, because they grow it themselves. When they're growing it themselves, they can keep what they use and sell the rest. And then, of course, overall, as all these things happen, of course they're happening in bits and pieces in isolation, but the big picture as it emerges is that you certainly have a healthy planet, healthy plants, healthy species, and healthy humans. So that certainly deserves to be recognized and paid for. And if we can get to the measure of $100 a ton of carbon for regenerative agriculture, we can actually turn the tide around. You have 500 million smallholders worldwide. Take the case of India. Just one country alone has 120 million smallholders, cultivating about 170 million hectares of cropland. Just that country alone, if it is allowed the play of carbon credits, our research has shown us that on an average, including the reduction and the sequestration credits in regenerative agriculture, a hectare of land can actually both reduce and sequester about 5 tons of carbon annually. So if the farmers get $450 per hectare net of everything else that they make, suddenly you will see all the rural to urban migration stopping, youngsters wanting to do this, because then it becomes remunerative, because smallholders have anywhere between 2 to 5 hectares of land globally. And with that, you could actually change the entire conversation around carbon credits, around sustainable agriculture, and indeed a sustainable planet.
You're describing a situation before that, even though you're agnostic, it would almost make you a believer. Can you just...
Well, on the 31st of July 2017, I made my first visit to the state of Andhra Pradesh. where Vijay Kumar, the pioneer who started it all, he took me around to meet scores of women farmers in different villages, And what was happening there is truly transformative, not just in terms of their belief in what they were doing, and this was 6 years ago, but in terms of the impact they were already making. And of course, the numbers then were certainly not where they are now. There are about 1 million farmers that have actually changed course over the last 6 years. And this program already existed when I visited them. And then, as I was leaving, I told Vijay, I said, you're doing God's work. And then he laughed and he looked at me and he said, Satya, as far as I remember, you're an atheist. I said, I know, I believe in humanity, and that is truly God's work. And that's what you're doing here. And that's what all these women farmers are doing, bit by bit. It all adds up. The ocean was never made in a day. It's the trillions of drops that make an ocean. And it is the billions of farmers and their efforts across crop cycles and years that will actually change our planet for the better.
What's your view on the future? Where do you think this is all going? What are our chances?
Well, what are our chances as humanity? Yeah, well, our chances are bright, if you ask me. We are capable of incredible stupidity, but we are also capable of unimaginable wisdom when it is time to do so. And I think we are seeing the green shoots of both fear and action. People are now truly mindful of what is happening in terms of the climate breakdown. The latest IPCC report points out that there is little hope for a 1.5 degree future in terms of global warming, but 2 degrees is certainly achievable. It will still be very bad, but if we buckle up and we really do what needs to be done, and these women farmers in Andhra Pradesh are showing us the way. And if we just take inspiration from them, the people, the poor, that have everything to lose but had little to contribute to the climate catastrophe that the world is witnessing now, and their resilience is this little, their life, those of their children, their families, school, nutrition, health, everything depends on what they make in a crop cycle. And they are willing to take that risk, shun something that they have done for decades. For some, it's 4 or 5 decades, and turn to natural farming as the answer. We need to take inspiration from them. We need to see the evidence for what it is, and we can actually turn the tide on the climate breakdown that the planet is witnessing.
We've focused on ecosystem restoration, but just your thoughts on actual climate restoration as far as carbon removal. What role, how important that role is becoming?
Well, in terms of technical means of removing carbon, whether it's the oceans, whether it is the land, whether it is the atmosphere, they are all needed. As the IPCC report points out, the natural carbon sequestration or removal processes would have been sufficient had we acted 30 years ago. But since we didn't, we have done precious little in the last 30 years. It is extremely important that we look at every other technology. We need to be mindful that just the natural processes will not be enough to keep us under 2 degrees. So we should look at everything. But while we look at the big picture, what is extremely important is to remind ourselves that regenerative agriculture presents the most potent means of removing and sequestering carbon at an ultra low cost. Even at $100, it will be cheap for all of us to actually do what we need to do. Well, I have talked about $100 carbon. Actually, that is cheap. If you look at the studies that Shell, the fossil fuel company, commissioned, they put their mid-price range to high price range anywhere between $100 to $230. So that's how much people are actually prepared to pay, but they would like to hedge and push it as far as possible by not paying for it. if you got the farmer, now currently what happens is that when these carbon projects come along, farmers normally get anywhere between 20 to 50% of the price that is realized, and the price is only $20 in the best case scenario at this time. There are boutique trades happening at the $30, $40, but that's not at the scale that one would imagine can actually save us. So if carbon becomes $100, and instead of the farmer getting 20 to 50%, if you make sure that the farmer gets a minimum of 90% with the developer keeping 10%, which is fair, then that still gives, at a $100 price, every farmer practicing regenerative agriculture $450 net per annum. That's extraordinary, because at this time I can say with some confidence that literally no farmer, no smallholder makes $450 per hectare even from agriculture itself. So imagine what this does to the entire agricultural economy, that you are able to make this money on top of whatever it is you make, and they're already getting a price premium from clean food. They're already reduced their input costs to minimum, and the outputs have gone up. So all in all, it makes agriculture a really productive trade to engage in, and that will bring back the youngsters to the villages, stop the rural-urban migration and the social dissonance that you see in different communities, all the immigration that happens, all of that can be stopped. And regenerative agriculture, to me, is the magic bullet.